Welcome to the podcast Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. In every episode, we interview business leaders who are navigating the complex world of B2B marketing. Whether you're trying to grow revenue, swoop into a new market, or launch new products, we promise you've landed in the right spot. And now your host, Richard Byrd.
Welcome to the Above the Clouds podcast. Today, we have a very special guest and somebody not only that I consider my friend, but also a mentor. Today, we have Ken Proctor. And Ken has the longest job title I've ever seen. He has more jobs than anybody, hardest working man in business, I think. So Ken is a Vistage chair. He is a public speaker, an executive coach, and owner of the Grey Pointe Group. Please welcome Ken to the podcast. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Richard, for having me.
Oh, man, I'm really happy to have you here. And also, for our viewers that aren't listening, you'll see we're back in the lovely Anthem studios. So thankful to Nathan and the gang for hosting us here in these wonderful studios. I always feels so nice to shoot in here. I almost feel like I'm a real podcaster when I have this. Well, Ken, as you know, on the podcast, we always kick it off with our novelty answer, our question, and that is, if your company, or in your case, since you personify your company, were a bird, what kind of bird would you be?
That's a great question, Richard, one that I've never been asked before. And after deep reflective thought, I would like to be Big Byrd.
Ooh, nice. Why Big Byrd?
You know, Big Byrd is always affirming. I don't know if it's a he or a she, but it's always positive, uplifting, and I think it helps people feel as though they matter. And I've always appreciated that about Big Byrd and Sesame Street. And that's how I want to be viewed.
Oh, I love it. I love Big Byrd. He has mysterious pronouns. I don't know. Maybe it's a they, them. I'm not sure.
It's an androgynous, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, Big Byrd is great. I think that was one of the things I grew up watching that show, and I was really happy, for my son to watch it when he was a little kid. And I always thought that it does make kids feel so comfortable and affirmed, as you mentioned.
Agreed.
Usually we say, tell us a little about your company, but you have so many companies.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about your career, kind of how you got to where you're at, and a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Happy to. So I grew up at a time when one of my favorite shows was a show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Yeah. And I remember seeing a profile on people like Giorgio Armani and Ralph Lauren. And I always had an interest in clothes. And I said, I'm going to be a rep someday. I'm going to be a rep for Giorgio Armani or Ralph Lauren or something like that. And I graduated from college, and I went through the Macy's executive training program thinking that was my first step. Well, I went from Macy's to Saks, and then I got approached by a headhunter, except he wasn't representing Giorgio Armani or Ralph Lauren. He was representing a startup children's shoe company, and he was looking for reps. Well, not exactly my bailiwick, because I didn't have any children at the time, but I thought, why not? And I went to work for this company, and from there, I started in the shoe business for 25 years, working my way up from sales rep all the way to the president of a division, and then I was fired from that job, so I started my own company, started it, scaled it, and sold it. And I sold it at age 48, and I didn't know what to do next. So I thought about it, and I hired a career coach. And after 4 months of very intensive conversations and assessments, he said, you need to be a coach. Okay, and tell me why. He said, you're a great listener, and you ask great questions. And I got put on the path to Vistage. And for those of you that don't know what Vistage is an organization that puts business owners together in a group, and once a month we meet and challenge each other and hold one another accountable. We process issues. It's very confidential. And I started in Vistage about 12 years ago, grew that to 4 groups, and then started an executive coaching business. And from the executive coaching business, I started something called Art of the Question, because I realized through my own failures that I was selling and not asking tough enough questions, which is symptomatic of a lot of people in business development. And then from there, I transitioned into keynote speaking. And that's basically my career in a nutshell.
What got you fired from your first job? It probably is the thing that made you successful as an entrepreneur.
The job that I was working for when I was the president, at the time, this was 2006, and the internet was really coming on. It was kind of in its infancy, and the CEO of the company, I wanted to go head first into selling online because Zappos, which was an online shoe retailer, had approached us. They really didn't have any vendors yet that have signed on yet. And I wanted to go forward with them. And my boss, who was the CEO of the company, said, absolutely not. And I went ahead and started business with him anyway.
Oh, wow.
And he was very unhappy about that until he saw the numbers that we started putting up.
Yeah.
And then he started making decisions that were not in the best interest of online. He still believed in brick and mortar, which was fine. We were going in a different direction. And finally, he made the decision, I need somebody that's going to be more of a yes man to me and stick with brick and mortar. And he fired me. And, arguably, he had reason to. Because I had my own ideas of which way brick and mortar were going, and which way the internet was going.
Wow. Did you get to meet Tony Hsieh?
I did. Yeah,
Wow.
Actually, he came into my booth at a trade show in Las Vegas. And he came in with a buyer who I knew from a previous relationship at Nordstrom. And everybody else was escorting them out of the booth. They told me about what they were doing, and I said, where do I sign? Absolutely. And I actually started a friendship with Tony Hsieh. Went to his, this was years later, he lived in a Airstream in a container park, and he had a pet llama.
Wow.
And he was a little bit of an odd person,
Sure.
very quiet but brilliant. And I really liked him.
I've read so many case studies about him, how he built the culture.
That's
at
right.
Zappos, and that just one of those cultures that as a small business owner that I just, would kill to have that kind of amazing customer-focused culture that they had.
And interestingly enough, he started a protocol that every person, regardless of where you start in the company, you have to spend the first 3 weeks on the phone talking to customers, regardless of your title. And he also instituted something that after 3 weeks of working for the company, you got brought into human resources and they offered you $2,500 to quit, to see how committed you were to the company. And less than 1% of the people took him up on that.
Some friends about the other night over dinner recently. It's weird because it's a weird case study to bring back. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But that really struck me when I read about that. And I thought, so I was telling it to my son's girlfriend who works at Starbucks.
Yep.
And they have a hard time when they recruit people there, that they get in there and they realize that they don't want to be in the coffee business after a few months, but they've already spent all this time training them. And I said, you should do what they did at Zappos. Let them hit the opt-out button.
The culture at Zappos was really what people would literally break the wall down to go work there. And as an executive coach, I'm very fond of asking my clients, if you back out compensation, tell me why somebody would want to work at your company. And it is literally, Richard, a deer in the headlights moment.
Sure.
Because they don't have an answer for that. But I will say Zappos leaned into their employees and always treating them well and investing in them professionally.
Tell me your story about Vistage and how you wind up choosing that direction.
So when my coach said, I really think that you should be a coach, I was actually pointed in the direction of Vistage and another company called Focal Point Coaching, which was a franchise. And I liked both of them, and I got approved to be a Vistage, or to go through training for a Vistage chair. At that time, you had to have been in the C-suite with at least $10 million of profit and loss responsibility, and or start your own company with at least $1 million in revenue. I had both, so I got approved for training. And Focal Point, you just had to give them $50,000, and you were a Focal Point coach. And so I couldn't decide, and I finally met with the person from Focal Point. I said, what do I need to do to be a great Focal Point coach? He said, you've got to be a great salesman. Okay, well, I can sell. And then I asked my colleague at Vistage, what do I need to do to be a great Vistage chair? And she said, you must care deeply about your members. Well, that was it. So I went with Vistage, and the very first day of training, I'm in San Diego. And honestly, Richard, it looked like I was attending a Brooks Brothers commercial. All these older gentlemen that were clean and polished and scrubbed. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And the first thing that they said to us is the chances of launching a group are 22%. It's a 78% failure rate. And I remember looking around and thinking, who's going to be in that 22%? I'm going to be one of them. And that's how I got started at Vistage.
Wow. Yeah, that is it's a discouraging number to hear when you're in that.
First thing, yep.
Yeah.
That's the first thing they said.
Well, at least they're honest up front with you about how it was going to, how challenging it was going to be.
And it was.
Well, I'm glad you chose that path because I wouldn't have met you otherwise.
That's right.
That's where we met.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, it's top secret, so I can't say anything else about it.
That's right.
First rule of Vistage. Never talk about Vistage.
Las Vegas rules, right?
That's right.
Yep.
That is absolutely right. Tell me about when you had your own business. What were some of the challenges that you saw as a business owner?
Richard, there were plenty of days that I literally would have traded my company for a $10 gift card to Chick-fil-A. Very frustrating, trying to scale the business, finding the right employees, finding the right manufacturing, dealing with egos, dealing with retailers. We're a small business, and at the time, remember, I started my business in 2007. And we started growing, and then by 2008, I had a meeting with our CPA, and he looked at me and he said, "You're 6 weeks away from going out of business." Oof. And here I was thinking that I was going to take a victory lap because we were growing really quickly, and I said that to him. I said, "But we've got all these POs." He said, "You do, but you're bootstrapping this, and you're burning through your cash. I don't know what to do." And he said, "You got to go get a line of credit or a loan." 2008. I'm sure, Richard, you remember what was happening in 2008.
The banks were just giving away money for free at that point.
That's exactly right. And I learned a lesson about banks. Banks loan you money after you prove to them that you don't need it, not when you need it. And so I learned a hard lesson in business, and that is dig the well before you're thirsty. I waited until I was thirsty to dig the well. And we thankfully got a $50,000 line of credit, and that saved us. And then we were a much better financial steward to the business. And we created some new payment terms, and we were able to scale from there.
Somebody told me when I first got in, started my company, they were like, "Well, cash flow is really important." I was like, "Duh."
Yeah, right.
No kidding. That's the biggest understatement. It's like when people tell you when you have kids, it's going to change your life.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
Yep.
It is just everything. And like you said, things will look great. But if you're burning cash faster than it's coming in, even if you're billing it and you look great on the books.
That's right.
It doesn't matter if it's not in your bank account.
And I remember very clearly coming home from work one day. Now at the time, we owed our factory $310,000. Quarterly taxes were due, and it was a payroll week. And my wife, I come through the door and she said, "How was work?" How was work? Let me tell you. And she held up her hand and she said, "I need you to go pick up Kelsey, our middle daughter, at dance." And I'm like, I'm dying here. I got to talk to somebody about this. I didn't have anybody to talk to. And that's when those were one of those days where you have a $10 gift card to Chick-fil-A, you can have this company.
Yeah, and you can pay the factory $350,000.
That's it. Yep, that's exactly right.
Oh, man. Well, I think every business owner can relate to that.
For sure.
For sure.
Yep.
It is, I think that is something that people don't fully appreciate about business owners is how heavy payroll weighs over your head when you own a business.
And I'm sure you can relate to this. There were plenty of pay periods that I didn't get paid. We didn't take an income for the first year, and then I think we took about $25,000 in salary year two.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's the other little sneaky thing they don't tell you about business ownership is that you're the last person to get paid.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Yep.
Oh man, that's like, hey, wait a second, this wasn't in the brochure.
That's right.
About this.
Yep.
And my dad he gave me some great advice about lines of our bank dealing with bankers, and he said that whenever you need money, your banker doesn't want to have anything to do with you. But when you don't need them, they're going to be all over you.
That's right. And when you don't need them, they invite you out to lunch and a golf tournament and whatever.
Yeah,
when you do need them, right? Yeah, he was right.
That sounds like you learned a lot from that stage in your growth. How do you think that has influenced the way that you coach business owners?
I can empathize and sympathize with them. And for those of these business owners that are having meteoric growth, I always tell them you have to be mindful of cash. I didn't know any better and thought, but we're growing. What's the big deal? The cash is going to come. Our terms at the time were 2% 60 days. And the amount of people that paid in 60 days, not that many. Yeah. I mean, it was 90, 120. And then I learned this. I learned how to identify a lie. When I would call an owner or the credit department would call a store, you're next to be paid. I'm going to be sending you a check on Wednesday, right? That means that none is coming.
Yes.
Especially when you hear you're on the top of the list.
Yeah.
No.
And they said that to the last 30 guys.
Yes, that's exactly right. Exactly right.
That is another wrinkle that you don't think about having to do whenever you're in business is even if you have an accounts, receivable part of your organization, which we do, but I still have to do collection calls.
Yep.
Anybody out there, if the CEO of a small business calls you to collect money, just know they need that cash.
That's exactly correct. I would have to get involved because we needed the cash.
They were needing to make payroll, and your decision to slow pay them is hurting a lot more people than you think it is.
That's right.
I think that I could tell that, just from in our interactions in Vistage, that you walked a mile in the
absolutely.
Sure.
And it's funny. I was heading out to a trade show in Las Vegas, and I had gotten upgraded. I was sitting next to a guy, and he was asking me a bunch of questions, and he finally said to me, "Man, it must be great owning your own company. I mean, you get to work any hours you want." And I remember looking at him and saying, "That's right, I can work any 17 hours of the day that I want. And by the way, I typically don't get paid." So yes, it's great.
It is. Yeah.
But people don't understand that.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes in the early years.
But then hopefully one day you get to cash out like
that's
you were
right.
able to do.
Yep.
And it all pays off.
That's right.
One of the things you mentioned too was Art of the Question.
Mm-hmm.
So as a proud graduate of Art of the Question, but for people who don't understand or haven't heard of Art of the Question, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Art of the Question was born from my own failures. Because although I launched my first Vistage group quickly with 9 members, and then I spiked it to 11, and then I dropped to 5, and I can share with you, it was my fault. Because I was selling what we were doing. So I'm at 5 members, and I'm desperate. And I'm on my knees begging for members. And let me share with you that desperation is the worst smelling cologne there is, and I was bathed in it. And I remember getting a referral. Another chair called me and said, "You want to talk to this guy? He's in my group. He's not happy. You want to talk to him?" Sure. And I sat outside in his parking lot, and I said to myself, don't sell. Don't sell. Ask tough questions. So I went in and I met with him, and I said, "Tell me why you're interested in moving to another group." He said, "Well, my mother always told me that if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room." So you're the smartest guy in the room in your Vistage group? Yes. Okay. Now, how do you know that? And he started telling me about his blue chip education and this business that he has. And I said, "But how do you know you're the smartest?" And I'm starting to challenge him with questions. And the next question I asked him was, "What are your top 2 leadership blind spots?" Now, I'm not telling him all about my group or whatever. I'm not doing that. I'm asking him tough questions. And he said, "Gosh, I have no idea." So I'll tell you what, let's ask Elizabeth, your assistant, that same question, but not before you tell her to answer with candor, and then I'm going to send you out of the room. And at this point, Richard, I am literally having an out-of-body experience. I'm floating above this person that's asking these tough questions because I'm used to selling. And so I asked Elizabeth, she said, "Oh my gosh, that's easy. 1 and 2 are exactly the same. He micromanages the tar out of us." Thank you, Elizabeth. Paul comes back in. What do you think Elizabeth said? No idea. She said you micromanage the tar out of them. So we started talking about that. And I said, I'm going to ask you one more question. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee, go to the men's room, think about it. There's an Irish proverb that says, when you run from a ghost, it chases you forever. What ghost are you running from? And I left. And I come back after 5 minutes, and he said, "I came to this country with $200 and a toothbrush, and I'm desperately afraid of going back to that." This guy's running a huge organization. Wow. I don't think he's going back to that. But that was his ghost.
Man.
And I asked him if he could connect the dots between that ghost and his need to micromanage, and he said yes. And I said, "Are you willing to work on that?" "Yes." "Welcome to the group." And it was at that moment that I realized the power of asking questions, not telling him all about my groups, that got him to commit to my group. And then a week or two later, I was asked by another member to evaluate 2 sales guys presenting to a new prospect in the pipeline inspection business. And it was essentially, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how long we've been in business, these are the services we offer, I'll call you next week. And my member said to me, how do you think that went? I said, I think it was not good. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, there's good, there's not good. That wasn't good. What did you learn about the prospect? What metrics are they using to determine which pipeline inspection company they go? What do they value? What's the best experience they had? I asked a bunch of questions. And at that moment, I said, I am going to start a course called Art of the Question. It's going to be 6 sessions, very, very interactive. I run it 48 times, 12 people per cohort. I've sold all but 8 seats over the last 5.5 years. It's become very successful.
I had a really good experience on that, but I remember it was also painful at times.
Yeah, well.
It seems obvious now that the name of the class is Art of the Question.
That's right.
And you would ask us questions, and then we would, as a person who does sales, we just kind of jump in and just start giving my differentiator and hitting you with value propositions.
Sure.
And, all the stuff that you learn to do as a, when you learn about sales, and you would just bloody our nose for it right there, and just like, well, you took the bait.
Yep.
Took the bait. You didn't ask any questions, and you're going, dang, it's right on the title.
That's exactly right. And when somebody asks me, why should I join your Vistage Group? Why should I engage you as an executive coach? My stock default answer is this: I don't know that you should.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're looking for from a peer group or from executive coaching. So let me go ahead and ask you a few questions, and then let's determine together whether or not it makes sense to move forward. So what that does to the trust meter, Richard, it elevates it.
Yeah.
And people will listen to you if they like you. They buy from you if they trust you.
100%. And I'll tell you, that is something that I use a lot in our sales discovery process, because I got rid of the sales process. I think at this point we call it the discovery process, because we had a client or prospect we were talking to the other day. I don't know if we're going to win it or not, so I can't tell you if this was successful, but they're in from Germany. Mm-hmm. And so, you've worked with Germans before. They were firing away all these questions about the company, and then they said, why should we work with you? And I used that exact line of, well, I'm not sure. Do you mind if I ask you some questions, because I'm not sure if it's a good fit? And then I just went straight into consulting mode and started asking them all these business questions and things like that. And the meeting went really, really well. Like I said, I don't know if we won it yet, but we got definitely invited to the next round. In fact, they sent a follow-up email before we were able to send the follow-up email, because it was a Friday afternoon meeting. So, I think that's the kind of thing that really is great. And I think before that class, before Art of the Question, I would have been like, well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Here's what makes us different. Here's why we're better than the last guys that were in here talking to you 5 minutes before we got here. And, and I just, I don't do that anymore.
It's a mindset shift. And, as I always tell people care about themselves morning, noon, and after dinner. And, if you ask me, would you rather talk or listen? Everybody's going to say talk. I understand that. A successful sales presentation is you're talking 20% of the time, and your prospect or customer is talking 80% of the time. They're answering questions. Because what's people's favorite topic? Themselves.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want to be sold to. They want their issue solved. Big difference.
Big time. One of the games that I like to play that I learned in Art of the Question is I will go to some function, a networking function or some sort of business deal where I don't know anybody at the place, and I will play a game where I try to learn as much about the people in the room, without telling them anything about myself. And I keep a tally, and it's really interesting because I've been to some of those things where maybe I talked to 8 people, and I learned all kinds of stuff about the health problems, you name it, and I didn't reveal nobody in that place could tell one thing about me. I think
that's a successful event, because you know what, Richard? If you ask people about themselves, they'll listen for hours, and they'll walk away and say, boy, that guy Richard, what a great conversationalist he was. You didn't say anything except ask them questions. That's how our brains work.
Yeah, it's fun. It's kind of a fun thing to do when you're trying to sharpen that skill or learn to use that muscle.
That's right.
It's hard not to, because I think one of the examples you gave was like when people you say, oh, you just got back from vacation. They're like, oh, I was in Costa Rica. Oh, I love Costa Rica.
Yep.
I've been to Costa Rica a million times. Did you eat at this place? All the questions that just jump right in and hijack those conversations.
That is the most egregious crime scene you can come across. It's the crime scene of hijacking. And I get it, because people, in an effort to be relatable, they want to tell you about their trip to Costa Rica. But my wife and I raised 3 kids. And we raised them that they have to ask 3 questions about a person's experience or story before relating their own. Now, if you're the parent of a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old, go ahead and cue the eye roll, which we got plenty of. But they're all doing adulting really well because they are so naturally inquisitive. And what I tell them, replace judgment with curiosity. And people are far more interested about talking themselves than about hearing about your experience in Costa Rica.
Well, I'll tell you, that is, listeners, take note, because that is some of the best parenting advice you'll get. And I wish I would have known that advice before I met you, because I'd love to instill that into a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
It would be amazing. You tuned in to hear about sales and marketing, but you learned about parenting advice on this show.
That's right.
Multifaceted.
Yeah.
Tell me about Keynote. That's a new one.
I was once asked a question, when does work not feel like work? And for me, it's when I'm speaking publicly, because I don't suffer from stage fright. I really enjoy the opportunity to make a difference in people. And so about a year ago, I embarked on a journey with a company called Brand Builders Group. And they help speakers sort of refine their message. And it's a difficult process, because when coming up with a topic for your keynote, one of the questions that they ask, in one word, what problem do you solve? And I agonized over this for weeks. And I kept thinking about it. And then I had another meeting with my brand strategist. And I said, I'm really struggling with this, because I think I solve a lot of about making people feel heard. Well, that's not a problem, and that's not one word. So he said to me, tell me a story that happened to you recently that not most people don't know about you. I said, okay. Well, a couple weeks ago, I was pulling out of my neighborhood, and I saw these 2 girls about 9 and 7, and they had a little card table set up. Well, U-turn, and I got out, and I said, ladies, what are you selling? Handmade bracelets. Well, I'm interested because my anniversary is next week, so why don't you tell me about these? And they started telling me that they can customize it and make any color you want, and on and on and on and on. And I said, okay, how much are they? 50 cents for one, $1 for 2, but if you buy 2, you get the 3rd free. Bargain. And I looked at them and I said, I'm a buyer. I'm going to buy 1, but I disagree with the price. I think they're worth $20. And they said, well, we can't make change. I said, I'm not asking for change. Ladies, you've got labor costs here. You've got your cost of materials here. You set up this nice store. I'm more comfortable with $20. You can imagine how they felt. And I told that story to my strategist, and he said, I know what the word is. You solve the problem of people feeling insignificant. You help them feel significant. And he nailed it. That's exactly correct. That's what you do with Art of the Question, executive coaching, things like that. And then it all tied together. So I just presented a keynote in Nashville. I was selected one of 18 speakers out of 300 that applied to give a 15-minute presentation. And then you get, right away, you get feedback from the owners of the company. It's not for the faint of heart. And my presentation was exceedingly well received, and I was given the award for the best speaker of the symposium.
Oh, that's remarkable. That's
so
great.
I want to do more of that, and it centers around how to make employees feel as though they matter, how to make them feel significant, which, with regard to retention, is the most effective tool you can possibly have.
I think back on my career, and when I did feel like I was a significant part of the organization, I was happier, one. And then also, I felt like I would leave the company in a lurch if I left.
That's right.
And almost would stay out of pure guilt.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Or what kind of organizations do you want to speak in front of? Is it organizations, companies? Who are you talking to?
I've already spoken in front of some very big companies, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, Northwest Mutual, Massage Heights, Planet Fitness, people like that. I want to continue to focus on companies that have a lot of employees, that they are challenged with how do we get people, how do we attract great people, and how do we get them to stay? How do we retain them? So I want to talk to, and really literally everybody needs to hear the message because most people don't think this way. And I need to share one story from this presentation that I give, and it's so impactful to me, and it happened in 1974. Growing up in Boston, I went to the airport with my parents to pick up my grandparents, and my dad said, "Look over there." And who was sitting there was Dave Cowens, who was the center for the Boston Celtics. And my dad encouraged me to go talk to him. And I approached him, and he stood up. He's 6'10" and a half. I'd not hit my growth spurt yet. And he introduced himself. And he immediately started asking me a whole bunch of questions about me. Do you play basketball? What position do you play? What team do you play for? What's your best shot? Are you a righty or lefty? On and on and on. And then finally, after a few minutes, I said, "Mr. Cowens, may I please have your autograph?" And he said something to me that I remember 51 years later. He said, "On one condition, that you give me yours first."
Wow.
And I blurted out, but I'm not famous. And he said, "You may not be famous now, Ken, but someday you're going to be because I'm a great judge of character." And I walked away from that interaction feeling like a major stud. Of course, none of my friends believed me that he asked me for my autograph. He did. But the takeaway was, how did Dave Cowens make me feel about myself after an interaction? He didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And how do we as leaders make employees feel about themselves after we have an interaction for them? People are not typically mindful of that. And what this keynote presentation is about is why you need to change your mindset if you really want to drive retention.
I bet you when he asked you that and he said, I'm a good judge of character and I know you're going to be famous, I bet you felt like, nothing's going to stand in my way. This is, I'm going to be big. It's going to be big one day.
He made me feel as though I mattered. He made me feel that I was capable. Yes, that's right.
Wow.
And I was 9 years old.
Man, what a gift.
Yeah,
What
truly,
a gift to
truly.
do, especially, you see so many athletes and famous people or, can be self-absorbed. And when you see something like that, it's really remarkable.
It left an indelible mark on me. And I've always been mindful of how do I make others feel when they leave a conversation with me.
What do you know now in your career that you wish you would have known on day one?
That to be really successful, you have to make it about the other person. You have to challenge them. You have to ask them about them. You have to find out, what do they want? And how can you help them get that? And if you can help them get what they want, you will be truly successful in your professional career. I didn't know that. I used to think, well, let me just tell you what I can do and what I have. No, that's wrong. Let me understand what you're looking for. And then let's see if it's the right decision to work together. And if it's not, let me refer you to somebody that might be a better fit because my network is vast. Immediately, the trust meter goes through the roof. Immediately. But everybody else is going to say, well, I can do this and I have this.
Yeah.
No, I wish that I had known that on day one. And I think at this point I might have been the President of the United States.
Yeah, well, commission breath, right?
That's right, yeah. No commission breath. That's right.
Yeah, that's such a great term that I stole from you. We've talked to a lot of salespeople in our role. It's one of the things we see as a marketing firm that focuses mostly on business to business is that sales and marketing need to work very closely together. So we've gotten really involved with the sales teams of our clients, and that's one of the lines that I always throw out when I hear that is like, whoa, you're giving off serious commission breath here.
Yep. And the other thing that I always like to say to salespeople when they are too eager, okay, we're on a blind date, and you ring the doorbell, you open the door, and you're standing there with your overnight bag. And I've not even met you, so don't do that.
Yes. Yeah. Serious turnoff.
Yes.
Well, for nice girls.
Mm-hmm.
No. Yeah, you may have already answered this in a roundabout way, but from since we are talking to mostly sales and marketing people on this podcast, what do you think the biggest obstacles you see for most of the people you work with are?
As far as leaders go?
Yeah, leaders, and if you have to work with salespeople, and I know you go across all industries, but are there some common obstacles that you see?
Most typically it's awareness, that people aren't realizing how they're showing up. And so, as an example, I have a very successful CEO, and he said to me, I think that my people, especially my salespeople, are afraid to approach me. And I looked at him and I said, you can remove the word think from that statement. They are. And he said, I sense that. I don't know what to do. I said, well, do you ever say to them when they come to you and say, hey, what should I do about A, B, and C? And you say, well, what could you do about A, B, and C? I'd like to hear your opinion. Tell me, what do you think? He said, I never do that because they come to me with a question, and then I answer the question. Your role as a leader is to develop more leaders and to develop autonomy, not to just answer the questions, because now you're indispensable. You have to teach others to answer for themselves. There's a reason why you see at ponds, it says, don't feed the ducks. Because the ducks become dependent on your handout. And when the people aren't there, they starve. It's no different in sales. It's no different. You can't always feed the ducks.
Yeah.
You got to teach them to fish on their own, so to speak.
When you do become the CEO, people are coming with you with the questions that they can't answer, and you feel like you're answering questions all day long.
That's right.
And you fall into that trap,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't even aware that you're doing it. And I think also for leaders, when you say something, it carries a lot more weight than you think it does, because you think of yourself as your 20-year-old self.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm thinking, well, we're just two guys working at the same company, and we're working alongside each other, and I'm trying to help, and I'm not the guy in the ivory tower. We're a small company. But when you're the CEO and you tell somebody something, it hits differently than what than you assume it does.
It does hit differently, but it also hits differently if you say, you know what, I would be really curious to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah.
How would you answer the question? Because what I've just done is I've just told you that I'm interested in your thought process, that I want to allow you to feel heard, not just listened to. And as I always tell the folks with whom I work, allowing somebody to feel heard is so close to love that most people can't tell the difference. Truly. And we, as leaders, as salespeople, marketing people, we don't allow people to feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be heard.
Absolutely. 100%. I always have to remind myself of that, and I'm always reading about it. And you've ever read the book Multipliers?
Yep, sure.
It's an older book, but
Yep.
I revisited it this year, and I was like, I've become a diminisher, I think. I'm not I used to be really focused on being a multiplier, and I thought it's really interesting. One of the things she talked about in that book is the 51% rule. Do you know this?
Mm-hmm.
And where if somebody comes to you and says, hey, what should we do about this, boss? And you could say, well, I'll give you my thoughts on it, but you own this. So no matter what I say, you get 51% of the vote, and we're going to go with what you do. But here are my thoughts on it,
Mm-hmm.
but you make the decision.
That's right.
And put it back on them. And I think that's something that is, when times are good and things are going great, it's easier to do that. When times are tougher,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like every decision you make, is the weight of the world is on you. I think CEOs, and business owners, they are the, like in basketball, there's this thought of the, Kobe Bryant was like, I always want to take the game-winning shot, or
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jordan and all these guys. I think business owners go into that mode too. They're like,
Sure.
nope, the game's on the line. I'm making the call.
Yep.
But I think that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. It's a totally wrong message to your organization.
Well, recently, Richard, one of my newer clients owns a building with his name on the side of the building. And out front in the parking lot, there's a spot that says reserved for the CEO. Yet, in reviewing his sort of year-end statement to his employees, he says that our most important asset are the employees. Well, I challenged him on misalignment. My most important asset, our company's most important, are you, yet I have a spot out front row, that says reserved for the CEO. What message are you sending? To me, there's misalignment there. And he said, where should I park? If it were me, I'd park in the last row. I'd leave, if the employees are truly your greatest asset, let them park up there.
Yeah.
You park in the back
spot.
That's right. And so a lot of times, Richard, my role is to help people become aware, and they're just not realizing. Employees, they may not always listen, but they're always watching. So you have to model the behavior you want replicated.
Yeah.
Same with parenting, by the way.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities between
There really
business
are.
ownership and parenting, I think.
That's for sure.
Yeah, you think your kids aren't listening to you because they can never they seem like they never follow your advice. You're like, I told you,
Yep.
brush your teeth every day or
Right.
whatever, do your homework. And they never seem to do it. But man, when you say something that diminishes your character, they hear it the loudest.
That's exactly right.
What's the biggest misconception people have about coaching?
A lot of people confuse coaching and consulting. And I always tell people a consultant is going to say, you know what? Do A, not B. This is black, not white. That's a consultant.
Sure.
A coach, and I always use this analogy, if you have a splinter in your foot, a coach is going to help you work the splinter to the top of the skin, but ultimately you have to pull it out. The coach does not pull it out for you. A consultant will. A coach will not. So a lot of times people confuse coaching and consulting. It's not the same thing. Or as a consultant to say, hey, do this. A coach is going to say, tell me why you want to do this.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
What do you think that is? Is it more interpersonal as opposed to solving a business challenge directly?
A consultant is going to solve a business challenge.
Yeah.
I believe that any business challenge that I've ever encountered with any of my clients is solvable by the client if you ask them the right leading questions to get them. And I say this all the time, Richard, the journey inward is the longest journey of all. People have to believe in themselves. And so I'm going to ask them questions, even though I might disagree. If I say, hey, tell me what you're going to do about this, and I disagree with them, okay, help me understand how you got there. And then I'm going to ask them, have you considered this, this, and this? No. Tell me why not. Tell me what that looks like. Again, I use this frequently. Many times leaders, it's kind of like teaching somebody how to ride a bike, teaching your kid how to ride a bike. You get them on the bike, you hold on to their bike, you put them on in grass, and you say, okay, go, pedal, 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 pedal. And then you let go and then they fall over, right? And you try again. Some leaders never let go of the bike. So the kid doesn't learn to pedal on their own. They're just waiting for the leader, and that precludes scale.
I was at a conference the other day, and they were talking about solving this business challenge. And the guy at the front said, well, the first thing, it starts with understanding yourself as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, give me my money back, because that's the hardest thing you could ever do. It's like,
that's right.
That is not that's cheating, because that's not something that we're going to solve in this 4-hour thing. This is a multi-year journey.
That's right. As I said, the journey inward is the longest journey of all.
Where do you see coaching going over the next 5 to 10 years?
A lot of coaches are now using artificial intelligence and chat to come up with questions, to come up with answers, things like that. I think they're going to be relying more heavily on that, which I don't believe you can automate trust. Mm-mm. And so if I use chat, hey, what should I talk about on Richard's podcast today? Okay. Yeah. Those ideas are not mine. They're somebody else's.
Sure.
And I find chat, forgive me, sometimes to be plagiarism.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of coaches are going to take shortcuts and use that. However, I do believe that there will always be a place for coaches that really challenge people to look inward and to say, yeah, I need to do a better job of that. And, I always ask this question when somebody starts giving off the slightest whiff of being a victim, I will say to them, how is this serving you? And I mean, that's something that artificial intelligence is not going to come up with.
Yeah.
So we're emotional people. We're not like just artificial intelligence. And I believe that it dilutes trust the more you rely on chat to come up with the answers. So I think coaching there'll always be a place for high-level coaches, but I think the business does have to evolve. I feel very strongly that there's a big opportunity coaching young people that are just entering the workforce that maybe didn't get the benefit of strong parenting or setting boundaries or expectations. I just heard a statistic. 27% of job applicants show up in the interview with a parent. 27%.
Whoa.
And, first of all, I don't blame the kid. I blame the parent.
Yeah, that's 100% a parent problem.
That's a parent problem, okay? But, I think that coaches have to help younger people say, you've already eliminated yourself from consideration if mom is sitting out in the waiting room.
If you bring your mom or your dad to a job interview at Bluebird, there will not be a job interview.
No, there won't be. And I just think that there's an incredible opportunity for awareness for younger people, not just people that are 60.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, that is a big problem that I see, is that there's so many people that don't know how to work in an office. And some of those people have 5 years of experience now.
It's so true. And those same people, Richard, what they also don't know how to do? Ask for a raise. And case in point, because if I had $1 for every time I've been asked this, I'd be in a different tax bracket. I come to you and I say, Richard, you've seen the price of groceries and my State Farm's gone up and Netflix is more expensive. I'm going to need like $5,000 more a year. And that's what they present to you. Versus, Richard, I would like to be put on the path to be earning more money. But to earning more money, I know I have to be of greater value to the company than I am currently. Could we please have a collaborative discussion on what additional skills and responsibilities I need to undertake to be worth more? Which one's going to resonate with you? Yeah. But we live in a society where I think grocery is expensive, so I need more money. That's the opportunity for coaching younger people.
It's the best way to ask for a raise if any young people are watching out here, because not many people have come to me and said, hey boss, how can I put more money in the company's bank account?
Exactly.
Nobody's asked me that question.
That's right. and I'm not necessarily blaming young people. It's just we don't think that way.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think a lot of the people who are, younger in the workforce right now, they came into a booming economy with record low unemployment and signing bonuses and all these things. It was markedly different when I came into the job market. There was a recession.
Sure.
Nobody was hiring. I was just panicking that I was going to have to move back home with my family, and I thought, I was applying for any job. I would have literally taken anything. In fact, I did. I took something that was not my dream job, and not even something that was on my radar.
Yeah.
But I had to take it, and that really influenced the way I thought about work and the way I thought about the employee-employer relationship. And I think that created a mindset of scarcity. And then I think the people who are in the workforce now have this, mindset of abundance.
That's
and
right.
I think, well, where's my signing bonus? And, how come I'm not getting 10 job offers? But I think the economy's shifting a bit now. I think we've all seen it this year. And I don't know that we're going to be back to the 2019, 2022 levels of unemployment for a while. And I think it's going to be a rude awakening for a lot of those folks.
I agree. And also, I'm a firm believer that kids today haven't had to struggle. If you did poorly on a test in high school or college, well, you can take the makeup. There was no makeup when I was in high school or college. No. It is what it is. Now, the reality is that in a job, there's no makeup.
No.
If you do poorly, and one of the things that I'm constantly coaching younger people on is when somebody says, that's not my job. I don't get paid enough to do that. That's the wrong attitude.
Oh, yeah.
Jump in and do it. And then you become known as a contributor versus a placeholder. If, hey, I'm doing these 5 things that I was told to do and that's it, you're not a contributor, you're a placeholder. I also call them 459ers. They're out the door at 4:59. Now, when I was in sales or in leadership, we had these sales guys that we refer to as Ellens. You know what an Ellen is?
No, what's an Ellen?
I'm out the door at 3 o'clock. We just got to get home and watch Ellen.
Oh.
That's an Ellen, okay? There are Ellens, okay? You've got to constantly be thinking about how can I add value to the team, to the company, to my client? What could I be doing differently? That's a contributor. I coached my kids when they were getting out of college on interviewing, and they got a lot of offers. And you know why? Because when somebody would say, well, why do you want to work here? They would answer and they say, I'm just curious. What brought you here and what keeps you here? That's a higher degree of emotional intelligence because it became a conversation.
Sure.
And me saying to you, Richard, I need more money. It's not a conversation. it's a monologue.
Yeah.
And bosses, you can attest to this, don't typically respond well to that.
No, you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
Man, here we go. Gonna have to. But the default answer is no, in that situation. And sometimes you're going, well, how can I replace this person?
Well, I actually, when I was the president of a division, I would have people come to me and say, I'm going to need like $3,000 or $4,000 more a year. And here was my stock answer. You got it. And they said, really? Yep. $4,000 more a year. Yes. Wow, thanks. And they'd start to head out the door. Hold on. Tell me how you're going to be worth $4,000 more a year. Don't answer me now. Think about it. And then talk to Carol, she's my assistant, and make an appointment with me in a week. Come back and present a plan to me how you are going to be worth $4,000 more a year. Now, that typically got me a 60% reduction of people coming back to me. But some would, and they would say, well, I can do this and this and this. Okay, good. Tell you what, you have that $4,000 6 months from today. If you do all these things that you outlined, I will give you the raise. But if you only do 75% of them, you don't get a raise.
No raise. No
Right.
partial credit.
Nope. You have to do them all. Okay? And then you'll be worth the $3,000 or $4,000 more a year. Yes. And only one person ever did that.
Really?
One. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Why do you think that is?
Because the easiest thing to do is to say, I need more money. The hardest thing to do is to say, this is what I think I'm going to do to be worth more money, and then do it.
Yeah.
Accountability is a big problem today. And I always ask people when they say to me, how do I hold people accountable? Great question. I'm going to ask my employee, what's the best way to hold you accountable that feels supportive versus me micromanaging you? And what should I do if you're not doing what you say you're going to do? So as I say in Art of the Question, ask for the cookie recipe, bake the cookies, serve the cookies back. They're not going to get upset because guess what? It's their recipe.
They still don't like the cookies. You can't make those kinds of people happy, though.
No, and you need to find a replacement. Yep.
What about, so this being a sales and marketing podcast, what are you doing from a sales and marketing perspective to promote all your businesses? And what seems to be working the best?
So I only use one platform, and that's LinkedIn. And I post every week, Monday through Friday. And it took me years to crack the LinkedIn code. And I'm going to share it with you.
All right, listen up, listeners.
Authentic plus relevant plus vulnerable equals valuable. So you will never see reconstituted, recirculated posts from me that I took from Fast Company or the Wall Street Journal or Inc. or whatever and post that, because I believe LinkedIn is your digital reputation. And I'm going to do everything to enhance my reputation. And your goal is not drive a whole bunch of new customers to you. It's to enhance your reputation to become a thought leader so you stay top of mind. That's the only platform I use. And I do videos on Tuesdays and Fridays, and they're always less than 35 seconds. And I always try to put a teaching moment in them, and all the content is original, all of it. And I did a poll once, what do people read the most? And you know what it is? Stories about failure and how you overcame the failure. That's what people read the most.
Yeah.
It's not Inc.'s magazine of 7 KPIs every... No, it's not that. That's what I'm doing from a marketing perspective. And I always ask myself, what is my brand and what is my brand promise? And am I communicating that properly to my prospects and my clients?
What's your brand promise, Ken?
My brand promise is that after working with me, you will become far more aware about how to make others feel important, significant, as though they matter. And you're not going to do things like hijacking or answer for everybody all the time. My brand promise is awareness.
That is really good. You have very good LinkedIn content. If I do,
thank you. All original.
Do you get better engagement with the videos than you do the written posts?
I get better engagement with the written posts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it depends on the video, but I posted a video today about you're coming home for the holidays and you're introducing your new spouse, okay? And so if I am the new spouse or the new boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, I'm going to ask the parents, hey, what is the story about your boyfriend or girlfriend from them growing up that always makes you smile. Instead of me telling you all about me and who I am and what I do, whatever, I'm going to make, and as I say in the post, make the other person the star of their movie. Don't try to be the star of their movie. Make them the star of their movie.
That's a good point, because everybody is the star of their own movie.
That's right.
And
but I don't want to try to be the star of your movie.
Sure. No, that's when you run into really big problems.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Nobody likes that guy.
That's right.
Yeah, let's talk about storytelling, because I do think, the way you're, that vulnerability component of what you're talking about, something that can be very challenging to people, I think, to talk about their failures in life. But if you think about movies, if you had a movie where the character was just, everything was great and, they started out in a great spot and things just got better for them as it went on, nobody would ever watch that movie.
That's right.
It's somebody who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps or went through a tough time or, had that fall and somehow came back from it.
There has to be an emotional connection. There has to be struggle. And there has to be moving somebody and somebody be able to say, wow, that's a great story. Now, I can tell you what dilutes a story. When people, and I have a client like this, and I had to call this out to this person. Last week on Tuesday, no, it was Wednesday. No, it was Tuesday. No, it was Wednesday, okay? Doesn't matter. Not germane to the story. There has to be executive brevity, and there has to be an ability to move that person emotionally. There has to be tears in your words, so to speak. A person has to be able to say, wow. Think about Dave Cowens, that story, right?
Yeah.
What did he do? He made me feel significant. He made me feel as though I matter. And that, I think, is the relevant takeaway. Do I make people feel as though they matter during an interaction? Or do I focus on me? So people, they can see themselves in your story. That's what makes for a compelling story.
Because, I think that's everybody's little dirty secret. You meet people, then they seem like they really have it all together. Most people you meet, with exceptions, of course,
yep.
but most people you meet that you respect, it seems like they really have it all together, and they have not gone through. You don't think that they've gone through hard times, but everybody has.
Everybody has, and you know what, Richard? Everybody has a chapter of a story they don't want read aloud, and the guy behind you at Starbucks might be doing his dead level best just to hold it together. We don't know.
Yeah. So
let's give them grace. Let's make it about them.
That is something that's really missing in our culture today, is the ability to give other people grace.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. We become angrier and angrier by the moment.
Yeah, it really is. And I hear about these people that are, with Thanksgiving coming up, and they're dreading going to see their family because they don't want to talk politics or what have you, and their crazy left-wing or right-wing uncle or whatever, the opposite of whatever side they're on, is going to be there, and they don't want to have to deal with all this stuff, and they're writing them off as people and all these things. You just go, how would somebody write off a family member for a political party that probably doesn't really care anything about you?
No.
The politicians certainly don't.
That's right. That's exactly right.
What emerging marketing and sales trends do you see out there that you're interested in to promote your businesses? I
just delivered, and will be delivering to you, a Christmas gift. And the Christmas gift came about from an experience that I had with another member. And he and I were talking one day, and he said he cannot imagine life before he hired this HR person. She's doing a great job. And he had a yellow sticky pad on the corner of his desk, and I said, may I borrow that sticky pad? And I wrote down, I can't imagine my life before hiring Janie. And I said, may I have your permission to go leave this on her desk? It was at lunchtime. I didn't think she'd be there. He said, yeah, go for it. Well, I walked in, and she was there. And I said, I wanted to deliver this. This came from this member who's the president of the company. And I thought you should hear this. And she started to cry.
Oh.
And she said, you have no idea how badly I needed to hear that. And that inspired me for this Christmas gift that all of my clients are getting. And what it is a note card, except it's made out of wood. And it has your name on it, say Richard Byrd, and it's literally made out of wood. And you can take a marker and write a thank you or gratitude. And the deal is you have to show somebody gratitude using this card. You can't just send it like, hey, you're having a great time in Houston, wish you were here. It's got to be about gratitude. To me, the most effective emerging trend in getting new business is to show other people gratitude. So they say, you got to talk to this guy, Ken. I mean, he's next level with his, thoughtfulness or the way he challenges you, whatever. And part of my gift to you is to give you something that allows you to stand apart. We live in a world that becomes, forgive me, but more monotone by the moment. Stand apart. And the thing is that social media promises significance, but really delivers insignificance. I want to give my clients something, and I want to teach them how to stand apart, not stand out, stand apart. A little note card made of wood will allow you to stand apart, and that's going to get talked about, I believe. And that's really my trend. This is the trend that I've committed to myself. Once a week, starting in 2026, I'm going to write a note to a client or a prospect that maybe didn't engage me and said, hey, I was thinking about you. I'm really impressed by the way you did blah, 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 and mail it. Like, mail it. USPS, mail it. To me, that's more effective than any post on Instagram.
Something about a handwritten note
That's
that
right.
has something thoughtful, produced in it.
That's right.
We have one of our contract writers that we work with. She's a wonderful writer, Elizabeth Ford. I'm gonna give you a plug. I just got a note from her yesterday, and it was in a really nice envelope, and it had a turkey that popped out, and I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. And it had a tucked away letter in it, and she just said, I'm really thankful for the work that you've allowed me to do for your clients this year. And it's really been meaningful for my company and for my family. Thank you so much.
And you will tell other people, as you just have, about that.
I did, yeah. I had to share it, and I brought it home, and I showed it to my wife
Yeah.
and my son.
Yep. Perfect.
And so, but yeah, it really means a lot to get those handwritten notes.
So to answer your question, what emerging trends? To me, old school.
Going old school.
Going old school. That's the emerging trend.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something to that. I think that we are, one of the things that we've seen in our, marketing efforts, and everybody asks me, what's working? What one thing works? And it's a trick question because, it can all work and can all not work.
Right.
And depending on the day and your audience and all these other things. But one of the things we've seen a lot is where there's human connection.
That's right.
Trade shows are one of those things that I was never a big believer in trade shows. I always thought, they're the worst, and you never can see an ROI on this investment, and it's so much work to put one of these things on, and you work like a dog up until the time it's there, and then you're on the booth for all that time, and then you have, after all that hard work, you just pack up all your stuff on Wednesday or Thursday whenever the show's over and send it back, and you think, what did I get out of that? And I think one of the things that we've seen is if you really take that, really do some good planning before those workshops or before those trade shows, get the right people in there, have good booth content, not just have two sales guys sitting around with a goldfish bowl waiting for business cards.
That's right.
But really drive engagement and drive that personal interaction with the audience at that trade show. You're going to walk away with some really good prospects, and you're going to help them. You're going to understand what they need.
Yep.
Why following up with them is going to be valuable.
Yep.
And they're going to want to hear from you.
Yep.
And those kinds of connections are really driving business old school,
I'll share with you another old school tip that I use a lot. If I meet somebody and clearly they're not right for any of the offerings that I have, I will always ask them, tell me your ideal client. And then the next day I'll send them a note. Could be an email, could be a text, could be a handwritten note, and say, I really enjoyed meeting with you. Now remember, you already told me no.
Yeah.
And I just want to confirm that your ideal client is this, 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 and this. May I have your permission to make an introduction because my network is vast should I come across somebody like that? Now, you already told me no, which 99.9% of people will say, done.
Yeah.
But you want to stand apart, you go ahead and you make that introduction anyway. That's old school. That allows you to stand apart. Your network is your net worth, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm always looking to add to it.
My wife, Ann, who you know, she is a matchmaker. She loves hooking people up romantically. So if she knows single people, she's always trying to find another single person I guess it means she's happy to be married, or she thinks it was a good decision.
Let's hope so, yeah.
So maybe I've got that going for me. But she always does that, and I hate doing that because it always, most of the time ends in tears, literally. And so I hate doing it, but I love doing it in business.
Yeah.
I love connecting people with job opportunities. I love connecting our clients with our other clients that maybe they can drive business, or even prospects like you're talking about.
For sure.
And I'm not doing it to hopefully influence them. It just occurs to me, and I think, oh man, maybe, I'd love for people to make money.
It's the mantra of serve, solve, don't just sell.
Yeah.
Serve, solve, don't just sell. I subscribe to that.
Absolutely. I think that's some of the best sales advice I ever was given for consulting. Because I'm definitely a consultant, not a coach. But because if somebody, they come and they have a real, a marketing problem or a sales problem they want us to solve, and I'm like, what do you think about that? They're like, what am I paying you all this money for?
Sure.
But I do think that we just start the consulting process in the sales, and partially it's because I'm just curious about their business, and I just want to understand, how they're making money, what is working, what's not working, and I just have all these questions when I go in there. I really think part of the pleasure of my job is just learning about different businesses. I've worked with all kinds of wild businesses that I never knew existed, and I'm like, wow, you can make money doing that. And I look at I have a few questions, and I go, wow, you can actually make a lot of money doing that.
That's right.
And it's really fascinating to me to just do that. So it's easy to lead with curiosity if you're really curious.
That's right.
And I love learning about the businesses and what makes them tick and all those kinds of things. And I think, like you mentioned before, it really does. I think it makes people trust you more, and it makes them go, wow, this guy is a marketing guy, and I wasn't sure what to expect with him, but I think he really is trying to put money in our pocket.
When you ask questions, you don't have commission breath.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Well, let's all try to avoid commission breath
Please.
at all cost.
Yeah, please.
No one likes that.
Nobody likes it. That's right.
What's the biggest business development lesson you've learned in your career?
To make it about the other person. Stop trying to impress people with your knowledge. And I remember early on, I had a meeting with a CEO of a $500 million company.
Wow.
Now, my company did a little bit less than $500 million, actually significantly less, okay? And I remember thinking to myself, what could I possibly say to this guy that would cause him to say, wow, this was a great meeting? And I realized at that moment, it's not what I say, it's what I ask. Let him do the talking. I'm not going to try to prove how smart I am. The only way I want to prove how smart I am is by asking him really challenging questions. And one of the questions that I asked him, if you had to fire yourself as the CEO and rehire your replacement, what qualities in the new person would you be looking for that you don't possess? And I will never forget his reaction. He said, oh my goodness, I have never been asked a question like that. That is a great question. So all of a sudden, my little company that did significantly less than $500 million was not important. What was important was challenging this guy. And that's when I realized it's not about what you say, it's about what you ask.
They're not talking to a business coach because they think that they've got it all figured out.
That's right.
But they're never going to let you know that, right? Because they're powerful executives, and you have to give the illusion that you know what you're doing in that role. And so you're going to have to really wear down the armor on somebody like that, I would imagine.
It takes about 2 to 3 sessions before they realize that they can trust me and that I am not trying to upstage them, or all I'm trying to do is to get to the answers. And again, another question I like to ask is, I am taking over your life personally and professionally right now. What's the first change I'm going to make in each category? They've never been asked that.
Yeah.
Never. And it really makes them think. And then I'm going to say, okay, tell me why you chose that particular answer. What's going on? I want to look under the hood, like deep under the hood. I just don't want to look at the oil needs to be changed. There's something always deeper.
Yeah.
Always.
How do you recognize it when they're giving you a smoke screen in that situation? Because I imagine if they're not ready to let their guard down, they're gonna say some BS.
It depends on their answer. If they say, wow, I have no idea, I'll just say, okay, let me ask you again differently. I'm changing your life personally and professionally, or I'm taking over your life. What's first? It's the same question, right?
Yeah.
What's the real answer? And so, I don't know. what's your hesitation in discussing this with me? And where else is that showing up in your life? I mean, I'm going to go right there, right? I don't give softball answers. And as it says on my website, if you want a friend, go ahead and hire my golden retriever, who unfortunately passed away, but she'll just sit in your lap and lick on you for $25 an hour.
She thinks you're great.
That's right. But I'm going to challenge you so that to get the real answers to help you elevate to the next level.
You know, that reminds me of what I learned in your class about active listening and the level 1, level 2, level 3 questions.
That's right. Yep.
Can you walk the audience through that? Because this was foundational for me.
So I tend to ask 3 levels of questions, okay? And the first question is a little bit below the surface. It's not your typical question. It's a little bit low, like a little bit more challenging. And the second level question is, once they give me an answer, is designed to say, wow, I've never been asked that. And then the third level is to really validate, oh my gosh, this guy's, he's got it going on. He's asking me these really tough questions. I don't start with them, those level 3 questions. I start with something a little bit below the surface, a little bit more challenging, and then I hit them hard on the third question. And that's, that works typically pretty well to get people to have a little greater comfort with what they're telling me, to get to the real answer. Because very infrequently when somebody says to me, just circle back with me after the first of the year, it's not that they're so busy. And a lot of times people will say to me, I just don't have time for this. Okay, let me ask you a question. Are you busy Saturday? Why? Well, I'd like you to come over and help me sweep out my garage. You busy? Yeah, I'm busy. Okay, let me put it a different way. Are you busy on Saturday? Yeah. Well, I'd like you to come over and sweep out my garage, but if you do that, I'm going to hand you a check for $75,000. You busy now? No, I'm free. What's changed? The value. So it's not that you don't have time, it's that you're not choosing to make time.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Why is that?
That is a wonderful question.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, well, I wish I could. I'm a kayaker. I love to kayak. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'd love to have time to do kayaking. And I said, I don't have time for that kind of hobby. And I thought, well, how much, TV do you watch on Saturdays?
That's right.
And I think that's the thing. It's all about how you prioritize what you want to do. But you won't think about it until somebody asks you a question like that.
That's a great point, because a lot of times people say, I don't have time to work out. No, you're not prioritizing it. And I get asked this question all the time. Are you training for anything? Yeah, longevity.
Yeah.
That's it, right? I have to prioritize working out, or else I might not have longevity. But it's important to me.
Have you read the book, The Miracle Morning?
Yes.
That was a book I read this year that really shaped the way I think about time and, how I make time for things. And for people who haven't read the book, they say that, you should wake up earlier. And for people who are not morning people, you will become a morning person if you do this, because he says do all the things that you need to energize yourself that you don't make time for first thing. So exercise, read,
reflective thought,
reflect, meditate.
Yep.
If prayer is something you do, pray. All those things that are going to read, do all those things that are going to energize you first thing, and you'll feel great when you get to work. And I thought that is something that I should do, because I'm the kind of guy that used to be. Getting up early is not a problem for me, and the older I get, the more I turn into my dad, and the earlier I wake up.
Yeah.
And so I don't mind getting up early, but I would just get up, get dressed, head to work. Doing that really helped me to just change the energy level I had throughout the day. It's really been helpful. And I think that exercising first thing in the morning was really a good way to get your blood going and all those things. And it's interesting, not many people have expectations of you at 5:30 in the morning.
That's right.
So
that's
the phone's not ringing. People are not expecting you to answer emails, any of that stuff.
That's
for
right.
most people. Mm-hmm. We just did a big project for a client in Azerbaijan, and they're 10 hours ahead of us, and they were expecting emails at 5:30 in the morning. But
understandable, yeah.
You talked a lot about younger people throughout our conversation. Sometimes we were slagging on them a little bit. But what advice would you give a younger person just starting out in their career?
It's a great question. And I'm going to reference a piece of advice that I gave my daughter as she was heading off to college. She said, Dad, what's the one piece of professional advice you think that I really need to hear?
What a great question.
Yeah. And I said, well, it's professional and personal. Look to make deposits in people's bank accounts without expectation of a withdrawal. I mean, metaphorically, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Just keep making deposits without expectation of withdrawal, because a lot of people today think, I can make a withdrawal first, but they've not made any deposits. When you make deposits, people want you to make a withdrawal, but you've got to make deposits first. And that's sort of counterintuitive to how our society works, which, no, just make a withdrawal. Don't make a withdrawal. Make a deposit. And that's true in business. It's true in sales. It's how it works. Make a deposit.
Yeah, well, these days, I think people operate off credit before you're making withdrawals.
Very true. Very, very true.
That reminds me of the Stephen Covey trust bank account. And,
Yeah, that's right.
Making those deposits, and, one withdrawal can make you go bankrupt.
That's right. I always tell people trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
We covered a pretty wide ground today on this
did.
podcast.
Yeah.
What's something we didn't talk about that we should have talked about?
What's the one question I get most frequently as a coach in keynotes? The question is, how do I become successful? First thing you have to do is define your level, your understanding of success. Now, it's going to evolve. My definition in the 20s was nice car, nice place to live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful wife.
Beautiful wife, right? Maybe 30s, but that's evolved, right? Recently, it evolved again. It was, I can't wait to go to work in the morning. I can't wait to come home at night. But it's evolved. And so now I've evolved my definition of success. I've transitioned from a life of I have to I want to I get to. And so if I say to myself, I have to do a Peloton workout. No, I want to do a Peloton workout to, you know what? I get to do a Peloton workout because there are plenty of people that don't get to. And that sort of reframed my definition of success is that I'm in the place now where I get to.
Yeah.
And I would say that define your definition of success. And again, a question I love to ask people. You're 75 years old, you're sitting on your couch, and you're thinking, I've lived a really good life personally and professionally. What is one change you need to make today to be able to say that when you're 75? And I think about that, okay? And everybody will have a different answer. But it's constantly evolving how you define success and what you want to be known as. Again, a question that I'm very fond of asking clients is typically I deal with men, not always, but 85% men. Father, leader, husband, rank them. Which one is most important for you to be great at? And typically the answer I get is, well, I know how I should answer. Okay, that's not the question. How would you answer? Well, father, leader, husband. Okay, is that what you want when you're 75? What do you need to do differently? It's just introspective questions like that that really get you to think, I probably need to do things a little bit differently. That's right.
I'm reflecting when you were talking about that, about how my priorities have changed throughout life. And the things I was interested in when I was in my 20s have very little interest in me, for me now, that I think, the things I was striving for at that point. I think people think they know themselves, but I think one of the reasons why that is so hard, we were talking about that before, that know thyself is probably one of the hardest things you could ever do.
That's right.
And I think it's because it is a moving target. And I think people will hold on. They still think of themselves as their 20-year-old self. And they still striving for these things that they probably won't bring them much joy in their 50s.
I know a lot of very successful people. I work with a lot of successful people. I've yet to meet the person that says, I can't wait to go home and hug my Ferrari. I've never met that person. There are those that spend their time trying to get rich, trying to look rich, and those that spend their time trying to become rich. Focus on becoming rich. Don't worry about looking rich. And by the way, that Instagram post of the guy that's 28 years old next to his Ferrari and giving you a subtle flex saying, my second Ferrari, so proud to be, it's fake.
Yeah.
It's fake. Don't buy it.
I had the opportunity to meet some wealthy people and worked with some wealthy people. We were in our 20s, and we were in a neighborhood that they called a newlywed or nearly dead neighborhood. Some people that were ready to retire and young people in their 20s moving into the neighborhood. And so we moved into that neighborhood, and the house, we could barely afford the house and all that, like many people do. And our neighbor was this very unassuming guy, and just the nicest guy you ever met. And he would have paint on his clothes and all these things. And I was talking to him, and it turns out this guy was a multimillionaire. And the reason why he had paint on his clothes is because he was a landlord, and he would go and repaint all the houses. Him and his wife would do this. I mean, he was just a do-it-yourselfer. He had plenty of money to hire somebody to do these kinds of things. But he was a real inspiration to me, because I thought, when you're young, you're like, I need to look rich. I need a cool car. I got to buy good clothes. I need to set the impression that I'm older than I really am, and that I'm more successful than I really am, and I will build this success. And that really opened my eyes to the fact that no, you don't have to do that. He had nothing to prove.
His leverage that he doesn't have anything to prove. So he can show up wearing paint on his clothes.
Yeah.
A lot of us think we have something to prove. Here's the real situation, Richard. Most people don't care. They care about themselves morning, noon, and after dinner. I've realized that, so that's why I make it about the other person.
And I have these discussions, and she's like, I have to wear a different dress to this thing, or, Nathan, I might have you strike this, but but I have to wear a different dress to this event that we go to every year, and because people will remember what I wore last year. And I'm like, I hate to break it to you, I love you more than anybody else on this planet, and I don't remember what you wore last year. I'm pretty sure that some rando that we walk on, we meet at this is going to go, there's Ann wearing that red dress she wore last year. Things must be tough at the Birdhouse.
And if that's what they think, okay. You know what? But again, they're not thinking that way. They're not thinking, oh my gosh, Ann's wearing the same dress. They're not thinking that way. They're thinking about their appearance.
Exactly.
That's all.
Yeah. I wonder if everybody notices that I'm wearing the same dress this year. Well, Ken, thank you so much for being on the podcast. As always, I love having our conversations, and so it was really nice to get a little free coaching. I think I've learned a lot out of this. And but for our audience that might maybe like to reach out to you, learn more about Art of the Question, talk to you about coaching, talk to you about a speaking engagement, where can people find you?
Just email me at ken@kennethproctor, that's PROCTOR.com. And if you email me, I'll email you back. And if you want to know about Art of the Question, please don't expect a sales presentation, because none is forthcoming. Same with coaching, same with Vistage. Just a bunch of questions.
Well, I expect nothing less from you, Ken.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Richard.
All right, thanks for being on the show.
Wonderful. Thanks.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, sharing, or spreading the news about us on your favorite channel. Thank you for tuning into Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. Until next time, stay above the clouds.